Broadcasting live from the Business RadioX studios in Atlanta, Georgia, it's time for Atlanta Business Radio. Brought to you by OnPay. Built in Atlanta, OnPay is the top-rated payroll and HR software anywhere. Get 1 month free at onpay.com. Now, here's your host.
Lee Cantor here, another episode of Atlanta Business Radio, and this is going to be a good one. But before we get too far into it, I'd like to thank our sponsor, OnPay. Without them, we could not be sharing these stories, so please support them. Today on Atlanta Business Radio, we have Ben Brunt, and he is with Noble Investment Group. Welcome, Ben.
Good morning, Lee. Thank you for having me.
Before we get too far into things, tell us about Noble Investment Group. How are you serving folks?
Well, Noble is a hotel investment development firm that's based here in Atlanta, Georgia. So our, typical, business model is to acquire hotel assets, redevelop them, or we also build hotels from the ground up.
So now, under these circumstances, how has your business shifted and changed?
Sure. Well, originally with the travel restrictions, in place, the, loss of jobs, across the country, and, the overall, shutdown period that, lasted, really most of April, I guess all of April, and a lot of May for many cities and states. It's been, one of the hardest hit industries in the country. So it's been a very difficult time, but, it's also been a period of time where we have, really come together, as an industry. And, we have, been working with our brand partners. All of our properties have remained open. However, we have, had to, reduce staffing levels down to appropriate, numbers where, we can, continue to, service the guests that we do have in-house.
Has any hotel been able to kind of at least grow a little bit, or is it just been like kind of the wheels have come off during this time and just say, look, this is how it is for a period, and then we'll slowly return to some sense of normalcy? Or has any hotel been able to say, okay, we can find business in a different way and pivot slightly?
No, that's not really been the landscape at all. So demand has, dramatically reduced across the board for all types of hotels. Some hotels, extended stay hotels, for example, have, performed the best, but they are still, dramatically underperforming how they would be, performing, under normal times. So I am not really aware of, any properties that, are performing better, than they normally would.
Now, is this something? No, go ahead. No, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, is this something?
I was going to say the challenge for hotels is that, we generally rely on a lot of corporate, demand during the week, and then, some leisure and group demand on the weekends. Conventions, have all, they've gone away for the time being. So you really don't have, any kind of a normal demand pattern that is in place today.
Now, going forward, there has to be at some point some return. Like, I can't believe we're never going to go to hotels anymore. I can't believe we're never going to travel anymore. I can't believe we're never going to have trade shows and conferences anymore. Is that
sure?
When you're projecting out, like, at what point do you see some return to normalcy?
Well, we think it'll be, market by market, and, asset type by asset type. And so we see, initially, we've started to see a little bit of, leisure, transient travel. So some folks that are, becoming more comfortable, there's a lot of pent up demand. They want to go somewhere on the weekend. They may not be ready to fly yet, but they're happy to jump in their car and, head to a town that, is known for, more, kind of leisure, retail dining type settings like a Charleston, a Savannah, perhaps a Nashville. So those markets we do expect to experience a bit of kind of initial, demand growth, but again, really more so in that leisure transient, demand segment. Later, perhaps, after, the public has had an opportunity to kind of venture out on their own, hopefully, soon after Labor Day, we expect, businesses to really begin to travel again. And that's really where, we'll start to see, some real movement, is when that happens. Certainly, markets like Orlando, Universal has announced, that they plan to, reopen in June. Disney will reopen in July. But again, it significantly reduced, occupancy levels.
And then even when you do open up, you have to take all these health precautions, and maybe you can't fill the hotel to the same extent that you could previously. Is that right?
We don't believe that that'll be the case, for hotels because, folks have, individual rooms. We can observe guest terms, can observe social distancing, in the public areas. Yes, there will be some hotels based on, their layout, in the food and beverage areas and how food and beverage, will be delivered. We certainly think for the time being that buffets, are not going to be part of, how food and beverage gets delivered. It will be, some kind of, boxed offering, that is, not that is kind of pre-packaged and delivered to the guest, each morning.
And then when do you think like kind of the high-end luxury hotels will come back?
Well, I mean, luxury is, we think they will certainly have their opportunity to participate with, the leisure, and the corporate demand as well as the group demand when that comes back. Part of the challenge for luxury will be pricing. Without that corporate demand, it's difficult for our industry to, really maintain price integrity. And those assets were, very expensive to develop, and they, typically require, a lot of labor and expensive labor. So, they really need to, be in a position where, they can capitalize off of a market, that, has really, begun to return, in full force.
Now, in this climate, I would imagine that some of the people that aren't as maybe cash rich will have a difficult time surviving. Is this something where an investment company, are you looking for opportunities to invest now, or there's some, kind of buying opportunities because of this pandemic? We do expect to see some opportunities. However, it's a little early. We feel, into this period, even though it certainly feels like we've been in it for a year. It's just been still short of 90 days. So most borrowers, owners of assets, have been able to negotiate some level of forbearance, with their lender. And that forbearance period, typically is, call it a minimum of 90 days. So some of those conversations will begin to happen again, in the month of June. And, it will depend on, the liquidity position, of the owner, the relationship that they have with their lender, the type of loan, the maturity. So there's a lot of factors that really come into play, when those discussions take place. But certainly, groups that do have, access to capital, good liquidity, will have an advantage, as opportunities, do begin to present themselves. What about in opportunities when it comes to development, where you're now spending this time that we're having the pandemic, not really trying to get clients, but trying to build something from scratch? Is any of that work getting done, or at least on the drawing board?
Well, given the lack of demand and the amount of existing supply, that is in place today, it is a difficult proposition, to, begin a new hotel, project. Certainly some have been announced, and a lot of the ones that have been announced, have been in process for, some significant period of time, or the developer has already, spent, a significant amount of money on that project. They may have recently acquired the land or be under contract with, non-refundable money on the land. And, for them, they need to press on. And the hope is that, as, overall construction activity begins to subside or decrease, that perhaps the cost to develop, will also decrease. So some, developers are in a position where they don't feel like they can press the pause button, and simply because of, the sunk cost position that they may be in. But, from our perspective, we think that, beginning a new development project right now is not exactly where we would want to, position our firm or our capital.
So now, at your firm, when this was going on, because your firm deals in the hospitality space, that's kind of your sweet spot, right?
Yes, we only are in hotels.
So you're all in the thing that's being decimated. What was those kind of early meetings amongst the leadership team? Like, how did you, kind of handle this as it was unfolding? Because it was like a slow moving kind of a car wreck happening. What was those conversations? Maybe you can share some advice for other companies that are going through a crisis of this magnitude.
Well, I mean, once the real, I guess, lockdown began, I mean, the demand, began to evaporate at hotels extremely quickly. So yes, we did have, a lot of conversations around, how we should, act and behave. I mean, certainly, our number one, concern is always our team members, both at the corporate office as well as all of our team members that are at the operating properties, and of course our guests. So the goal was initially to ensure the safety of, team members and guests. And then it was to really address the operating model at each hotel and, work to, put the right team in place that could, care for the asset as well as take care of, the, very limited number of guests that were in the property. So that was really, call it step one. Step two was having all of those conversations with all of our lenders. And, that, took some time, because lenders were really, they had to have that same conversation with really every owner of every hotel in the country. So, that it was a very busy time. A lot of modifications were put in place, and, really it was an example of, both borrowers and lenders coming together to work on issues together to at least, give the asset some breathing room while, we, kind of progress, through this early stage of the pandemic. So, like I said, a lot of those conversations will have to take place again. And because, occupancy it has been improving. April, really we feel, was the kind of the low point. May, was better than April. Hopefully June will, continue that trend. And as we move through summer, again, we expect, some gradual improvement with, really more of a meaningful improvement starting in Q3.
And then, but you're kind of, I wouldn't say bullish necessarily, but you're optimistic that things are progressing. You're starting to see some inklings that people are more comfortable and feeling that at least some groups are slowly kind of getting out there and exploring at least a drive away from their homes to experience the hotel life and travel once again.
Yes, I mean we're seeing some signs of life, in that vein, but by no means, is it, is anyone, saying this is anywhere near over. This is going to be a meaningful crawl, back to where we were. It will likely take several years before we experience the performance, that we had in 2019.
So now, what do you need more of? How can we help you?
Well, get out and travel.
That's the message.
But look, this is something that, this experience is very personal to everyone. So, we certainly recognize that, some folks are still going to be, concerned with traveling, but, I think the message that, that should be, shouted from the mountaintop is, look, what hotels have been addressing over the last, call it, 75 to 90 days, in terms of new cleanliness standards, new ways to, deliver food and beverage while still, creating a fantastic guest experience. All of that is what, owners and brands have been working on together. So we all recognize as an industry that, we are, on the front lines, really of helping people get that, level of comfort back. And, that is our mission, is to really, focus on that area so that when people do begin to travel, that they are very comfortable and feel very safe.
Well, we appreciate that, Ben. And if somebody wanted to learn more about Noble Investment Group, is there a website?
Yes, our website is www.nobleinvestment.com.
Well, thank you, Ben, for sharing your story today. I know it's been a rough road, but it seems like at least there's some sprouts coming that maybe we've kind of hit the bottom and we're moving back.
Yes, a few green shoots, but still a long way to go. But like I said, we hope people do get out and travel, and hotels will be ready, for them and ready to provide a great experience.
Good stuff. That was Ben Brunt with Noble Investment Group, and that's nobleinvestment.com for more information. Thank you again, Ben, for sharing your story, and thank you to our sponsor, OnPay. So please support them so we can continue to share these important stories. This is Lee Cantor. We'll see you all next time on Atlanta Business Radio.
Today's episode of Atlanta Business Radio is brought to you by OnPay. Built in Atlanta, OnPay is the top-rated payroll and HR software anywhere. Get 1 month free at onpay.com.